At the breakfast table, Julian Hayes slid the divorce papers across the marble surface toward Eleanor Vance. His tone was as calm as if he were discussing a minor stock fluctuation. I thought about what our son said last night. All night. If he wants Sophia Leo around that badly, then I'll agree to a divorce. I'll relinquish my claim to custody of Leo. I'll walk away with nothing. You can transfer my share of our marital assets into Leo's trust fund. Consider it my contribution to his upbringing. Eleanor set down her coffee cup, her brow furrowed. Were you just talking to me? Julian glanced down. The blue light on his Bluetooth earpiece was glowing steadily. She instantly understood. He hadn't heard a single word. A familiar wave of helplessness washed over her. For 5 years, this had been their reality. Every time she spoke, she was met with this same impenetrable wall of disregard. It was like the past few months when he'd come home every night smelling of a perfume that wasn't hers. She'd finally broken and asked him once, "Who have you been seeing so often?" He'd just given a breezy friend without even looking up. Eleanor sometimes wondered if after 5 years of marriage, he even remembered her name was Eleanor Vance. She was done. She couldn't breathe in this suffocating life anymore. She flipped the document to the last page and pushed it in front of him again. Just sign it. It won't take more than a minute of your time. Julian's eyes finally disengaged from his call, swept over her with a flicker of annoyance. Just as he was about to look at the papers, their son Leo came running in. "Daddy, are you going to play golf with Aunt Sophia later? I want to go too." As Julian started to rise, Eleanor pressed her hand firmly on his wrist. Sign. For the first time in what felt like years, he truly looked at her. There was a clear note of surprise in his eyes. Eleanor guessed he wasn't accustomed to his usually compliant wife acting with such force. Leo grew more insistent. "Daddy, hurry up. If we make Aunt Sophia wait, she'll get mad and tease you again." "All right." The next second, without even glancing at the contents of the agreement, Julian picked up a pen and scrawled his signature. Father and son were gone in a flash. Eleanor stared at the signed document, unable to decide if his action was a sign of complete trust or utter indifference. She picked up the pen, and next to his powerful signature, she carefully wrote her own name, one deliberate stroke at a time. In this lifetime, the names Eleanor Vance and Julian Hayes had appeared side by side only twice. The first time was on their marriage certificate, the second was here. As she finished, a single tear fell onto the page. She gently wiped it away, placed the papers in a pre-addressed envelope for her lawyer, and went upstairs to pack. Opening her closet, Eleanor was confronted by a wardrobe full of clothes that felt alien and garish. Not a single piece was something she truly loved. No one knew that the girl she was before 16 loved bungee jumping, drove fast cars, and laughed without restraint. But after marrying Julian Hayes, she had been molded and reshaped. She had to be gentle, serene, her smile, a carefully measured curve. The Hayes family never needed an individual. They needed a suitable Mrs. Hayes. Even after sanding down all her edges, she hadn't earned an ounce of his affection. Instead, she became a running joke in Julian's circle. They said she was like a doll with no soul. They said Sophia Lou and Julian Hayes were the ones who were truly meant to be. Thinking of this, looking at the clothes that symbolized her role, a wave of nausea hit her. She rushed to the bathroom and dry-heaved over the toilet. When she was done, she looked up at the mirror. Her makeup was perfect, but her eyes were hollow. Divorcing him was the rightest decision she had ever made. She refused to be strangled by the title of Mrs. Hayes any longer. She wanted to break out of this gilded cage and be herself again. Finally, she dug out a dress she hadn't worn since before her wedding and called her best friend Chloe. "Can you come pick me up?" The Hayes penthouse was never her home, and the Vance family, after marrying her off to the Hayes dynasty, had washed their hands of her. That wasn't her home either. Chloe pulled up to the curb, her expression puzzled. "Ellie, what's going on? Isn't it your birthday today? A week ago you were telling me you were going to celebrate with your husband and son." Eleanor froze. She pulled out her phone and scrolled through her messages. A week ago, she had indeed booked a table at their favorite restaurant. She'd even sent a hopeful message to Julian. The message was still there, unread, unanswered. Was she disappointed? In the past, maybe. But now all she felt was a profound numbness. She got into Chloe's car, and they drove to the restaurant she had booked. But as soon as she gave her reservation name, the maitre d' approached them with an apologetic expression. "Ma'am, I'm so terribly sorry. Mr. Hayes has booked the entire restaurant for a private event this evening. He's celebrating his wife's birthday with his son. We will, of course, refund your deposit double." Chloe laughed and pulled Eleanor forward. "No need for a refund. You're looking at the actual Mrs. Hayes right here. But as they reached the center of the grand dining room, they heard the sound of joyful laughter. Julian was there with Leo presenting a birthday cake to Sophia Liu. Julian's voice was gentle. "Happy birthday, Sophia. May all your wishes come true." Leo echoed him enthusiastically. "Happy birthday, Aunt Sophia. I hope you wish to marry Daddy and become my new mommy." Eleanor stood frozen, watching the three of them settle happily at their table. Julian's gaze never left Sophia, not for a single second. And her son, the child she had carried for 9 months and endured a life-threatening labor to birth, was thoughtfully pulling out Sophia's chair, pouring her water and even carefully tucking a stray strand of hair behind her ear. In 5 years of marriage, Julian had never known her birthday, let alone offered a blessing. In his entire life, Leo had never poured her a glass of water or handed her a napkin. Chloe, furious, rolled up her sleeves, ready to march over and give them a piece of her mind. But Eleanor grabbed her arm. "It's not worth it," she said, her voice flat. "I've already signed the divorce papers with Julian." Chloe immediately drove Eleanor to her apartment in Brooklyn. Eleanor didn't cry. Instead, it was Chloe who burst into tears, hugging her friend and ranting. "That man is a gaslighting narcissist, and that little boy is a spoiled brat. For 5 years, you've revolved your entire life around them. No career, no social life. I finally get you to come out for a coffee, and one call from him sends you running home to make him some special hangover cure. When Leo was a baby and wouldn't stop crying, how many sleepless nights did you spend holding him? You gave them everything, and this is how they repay you, Ellie. I know you must be hurting. It's okay to cry. Just let it out." Listening to Chloe, Eleanor picked up a beer from the coffee table and took a long swallow. Leaning back on the couch, she whispered, "Cry, I can't anymore." But she had cried before. So many times. When Julian's mother forced her to learn endless, tedious rules of etiquette, and she'd tried to confide in Julian only to be treated like thin air. When she'd waited up until midnight for him and he didn't come home, didn't even send a text. When Leo had a dangerously high fever in the middle of the night and she'd frantically called Julian only for him to hang up on her. She had once naively hoped for a life of marital bliss and motherly love. But they had never once seen her as part of their family. 5 years. She should have woken up a long time ago. After a night of drinking, Eleanor slept heavily. The next morning, her phone rang. The caller ID read, Julian Hayes. His voice was thick with sleep. "Where did I put the Patek Philippe I wear on Mondays?" "Without thinking," Eleanor replied, "in the walk-in closet top drawer of the dresser. And the matching cufflinks, in the drawer below the watch." The exchange was so automatic that it took her a moment to remember they were getting divorced. She no longer had to wake up at dawn to lay out his clothes for the day. She no longer had to wait until midnight with a bowl of perfectly warmed soup for his return. It seemed Julian hadn't even noticed she had moved out of their penthouse. Patiently, she reminded him, "You should have the housekeeper reorganize your closet. You can ask her for things from now on. We're getting a divorce. It's not really appropriate for you to keep calling me for this." She heard a non-committal, from his end, followed by the sound of a drawer opening. Thinking the matter was settled, she was about to hang up when she heard his next instruction. "Have that seafood chowder from downtown delivered to my office at Hayes Tower for lunch for the next few days." The line went dead. Eleanor let out a sharp, incredulous laugh. So all her words about the divorce had gone in one ear and out the other. It felt like screaming into a void. She took a deep breath, her fingertips trembling with anger, and promptly blocked Julian's number. For good measure, she also blocked the number for Leo's preschool teacher, but she had forgotten about his mother. So when she finally woke up properly and headed out for a late lunch, she was intercepted by Mrs. Hayes, who strong-armed her into her chauffeured car. The moment the door closed, Mrs. Hayes threw a stack of glossy photos into Eleanor's lap. They were all intimate shots of Julian and Sophia. "Eleanor, you've disappointed me immensely. From the day you turned 16, I personally taught you everything you needed to know to be a Hayes wife. A decade has passed, and you still can't hold on to Julian's heart. If I had known you were this useless, I would have overlooked Sophia Liu's background and chosen her from the start." The sharp corner of a photo scraped her neck, leaving a thin red line. When the Hayes family had chosen her as their future daughter-in-law, everyone had envied her luck. Only she knew the truth. From the age of 16, her freedom had vanished. Her sole purpose in life was to become a flawless Mrs. Hayes. The weight of this role was crushing. In her senior year of high school, she had deliberately rebelled getting a boyfriend and making sure Julian found out, hoping it would be enough to break the engagement. But Julian had said nothing. His family had simply sent her away to a strict Swiss finishing school overnight. She had only been married to Julian for 5 years, but the Hayes family had controlled her life for 10. She had had enough. She looked up, her voice calm, as she informed her mother-in-law, "I've already signed the divorce papers with Julian. I'm not taking custody and I'm walking away with nothing. Since you're so dissatisfied with me, you can find a more suitable daughter-in-law." She reached for the door handle. Mrs. Hayes, after a second of shock, grabbed her wrist, her voice sharp. "Eleanor, you wouldn't dare!" Her long, crimson-painted nails dug into Eleanor's flesh like needles. Eleanor slowly turned her head, a faint smile playing on her lips. "There's nothing I wouldn't dare. The title, Mrs. Hayes's, was never an honor for me." She pulled up her sleeve, revealing the faint, silvery lines of old scars crisscrossing her wrist. It was the first time she had ever shown them to anyone. Mrs. Hayes saw the twisted centipede-like marks and recoiled, her hand flying back as if burned. Eleanor gently traced the scars, her smile unwavering. "I never wanted to be Mrs. Hayes. Whenever I felt like I couldn't go on, I would cut myself. It was the only way I could breathe. Do you know what I screamed in my dreams for the past 10 years? She looked directly into the older woman's now ashen face and enunciated each word clearly. "I was screaming, 'Will somebody please save me?' But I understand now. The only person who can save me is myself. Only by being completely free, by being myself again, can I truly live." After calmly stating her piece, Eleanor opened the car door and walked away. This time, Mrs. Hayes didn't stop her. But the simmering rage needed an outlet. Eleanor went to her private garage and uncovered her car, a red convertible that had been collecting dust for years. She slammed her foot on the accelerator and tore out onto the street. Perhaps it was fate. As she shot through an intersection, she collided head-on with a black Maybach. The license plate was a custom Hayes one. It was Julian's car. A man quickly got out of the passenger side, Julian's assistant David. Eleanor lowered her window. When David saw her, he froze. "Mrs. Hayes." Eleanor wasn't surprised by his reaction. In 5 years, everyone in Julian's circle had formed a fixed image of her gentle, serene, as still as a pond. A woman like that, suddenly speeding in a sports car, was bound to raise eyebrows. She didn't explain. She simply handed him a business card. "If there's any damage, have him contact my insurance manager." Then she put on her sunglasses, revved the engine, and drove off. David stood there, stunned for a moment before returning to the Maybach. Mr. Hayes, the other driver. It was Mrs. Hayes. Julian, rubbing his temples in the back seat, just said coolly, "Let's go," as if it made no difference to him whether the driver was a stranger or his wife. David wisely said no more. But no one could have predicted that 3 hours later, the couple would meet again. This time, it was at a private racetrack in the suburbs. Julian was there to sign a land development deal with a partner. Coincidentally, a race was underway, the Atmosphere Electric. A red sports car was dominating the track, taking the lead with sheer speed and power, winning the championship with ease. When the driver got out of the car, a hush fell over the crowd. Clad in a form-fitting crimson racing suit that highlighted a lean, elegant figure, the driver captured everyone's attention. Even Julian's eyes held a clear glint of admiration. Then the driver removed the helmet, revealing a familiar face. David, standing beside Julian, gasped, "Mr. Hayes." Mrs. Hayes is an incredible race car driver. Julian didn't speak. He just watched the fervent gazes of the men around them, fixated on Eleanor, his brow tightening slightly. Eleanor had noticed Julian's stare long ago, but didn't acknowledge him. For years, unless they were at a mandatory high society gala, she had always pretended not to know him in public. It was what he preferred. So when the race organizer, who was from out of town, came to introduce them, Eleanor played along with his charade. She extended her hand politely. "Mr. Hayes, a pleasure to finally meet you." Julian remained expressionless, creating a moment of awkward silence. Just then, Sophia Lou's voice drifted over. "Julian, are you finished? If you are, let's head back to the office for lunch. I'm craving that seafood chowder your housekeeper makes." Eleanor turned to see Sophia getting out of the Maybach and walking over to Julian, linking her arm through his as if it were the most natural thing in the world. Perhaps feeling that Eleanor was no threat, Sophia even offered her a small, triumphant smile. As they walked away, someone nearby commented, "Mr. Hayes even brings his wife along for business meetings. They must be so in love." Julian's assistant, who hadn't left yet, shot Eleanor a strange look. Eleanor knew exactly what he was thinking. What a pathetic woman can't even hold on to her own husband. She said nothing, simply turned and left the racetrack. The first thing she did was call her lawyer. "How long until the divorce certificate is ready?" 7 days, the lawyer replied. 7 more days. Fine. She had endured 10 years. 7 days was nothing. She could wait. But just as she'd composed herself, her phone rang again. It was Julian's assistant. Mrs. Hayes, the CEO, is asking when the seafood chowder will be delivered. Also, Leo's teacher called. She can't reach you. His craft project wasn't brought to school. Would you be able to drop it off? Eleanor suddenly remembered. The night before Leo had asked her for a divorce, she had been sitting at the table painstakingly sewing a handmade project for him from a video tutorial. When she left, it was only half finished. She looked up at the clouds, drifting freely in the sky, and said calmly, "Tell Julian there is no more seafood chowder. There will never be any again. As for Leo's affairs, I will no longer be involved. Don't contact me again." She then blocked the assistant's number as well. In the CEO's office at Hayes Tower, David held his phone looking awkward. "Sir, Mrs. Hayes hung up on me. When I tried calling back, it went straight to voicemail. I think she blocked me. Maybe you should try." Julian frowned and for a rare change took out his own phone. He found the contact labeled wife and sent a message. "What's this tantrum about?" A second later, a red notification appeared below his message. "This person has enabled friend verification. You are not their friend yet. Please send a friend request." David leaned over and happened to see the message history on Julian's phone. The last message received was Eleanor's birthday invitation from a week ago. He couldn't help but exclaim, "Oh, Mrs. Hayes' birthday is the same day as Miss Liu's, so yesterday was her birthday too. Sir, did you get her a gift?" Julian was silent for a moment before replying flatly, "I wasn't aware." David wasn't surprised. After all, Eleanor had sent numerous messages and Julian hadn't replied to a single one. Before David could say more, Julian instructed, "Get her a supplementary birthday gift. You can handle the arrangements." "Yes, sir." David nodded. But as he looked up, he saw that Julian was already engrossed in a document, as if the instruction was a mere afterthought. David sighed quietly and slipped out of the office to pick out a gift. That evening, Eleanor received the birthday gift sent by Julian's assistant. She was a little surprised but refused it without a second thought. She honestly couldn't understand what Julian was trying to do. Her birthday was over. What was the point of a gift now? Besides, for the last 10 years, her only birthday wish had been the same freedom. By agreeing to the divorce, Julian had, in a roundabout way, granted her that wish. Eleanor had assumed that during the 7-day waiting period, she and Julian would have no more contact. But shortly after the assistant left, she received a text from her mother-in-law. "Eleanor, I don't care what divorce drama you're stirring up with Julian, but as long as you are not officially divorced, my grandson will not be affected in any way." Eleanor scoffed. How could Leo possibly be affected? He was the one who proposed the divorce. Before she could reply, another text arrived. "If you don't want this divorce to get messy, you will come to the family estate this weekend to be with my grandson as usual." Eleanor remembered that Julian disliked having too many people around, so after they married, they moved out of the Hayes family estate in Greenwich and into the Manhattan penthouse. After Leo was born, they had a standing weekend routine of taking him back to Greenwich. Today was Friday. Normally, she would have already picked Leo up from preschool and be preparing for the trip. Julian was always busy, rarely home before 10 p.m. This time, Eleanor went straight to the estate. To her surprise, when she arrived, Julian was already there. She ignored him and started walking towards the second floor, but he blocked her path. He asked inexplicably, "Did you like the birthday gift?" Eleanor looked at him confused. Did he not know she had refused it? Then again, it wasn't surprising. He treated her like she was invisible. Why would he remember if she had accepted a gift or not? Not wanting to talk to him, she just gave a perfunctory nod. But then he continued, "Leo is carving a wooden charm for Sophia. I've arranged for you to go upstairs and help him finish it." So accepting the gift came with strings attached. Eleanor gave a cold laugh, deliberately shouldered past him, and went upstairs without a word. Julian frowned but said nothing. On the second floor, Leo was sitting at his desk intently focused on carving with a small knife. As she got closer, she saw a beautifully finished wooden good luck charm on the table beside him. He was trying to replicate it. Her footsteps must have disturbed him. He looked up, and the moment he saw her, he quickly snatched the finished charm off the table. His lips pressed into a thin line of displeasure. "Mom, this is the one Daddy carved for Aunt Sophia. You can't steal it." A sharp pain like a knife twisting shot through Eleanor's heart. She couldn't believe it. The child she had once treasured more than her own life was looking at her like a thief. Staring at Leo's face, which was a miniature version of Julian's, she felt a suffocating tightness in her chest. "You don't have to be so defensive. I have never wanted anything that belongs to someone else. Besides, your father and I are getting divorced soon. Your dear Aunt Sophia will be your new mother before you know it." suddenly Julian's cold, reprimanding voice came from behind her. Eleanor, what kind of nonsense are you filling his head with? Are you even a fit mother? It was probably the longest sentence Julian had ever spoken directly to her. Eleanor turned around, looked at his indifferent face, and smiled faintly. You're right, I'm not fit. So you should find him one who is. With that, she walked toward the door. Eleanor Julian grabbed her arm, his deep voice laced with a warning. At that moment, Leo's smartwatch buzzed. He chirped happily. Daddy, it's Aunt Sophia, video calling. The next second, Julian let her go. Eleanor watched as he walked over to answer the call, his icy expression instantly replaced with a smile. She suddenly felt a profound sense of futility. Without another word, she went to the guest room, closed the door, and locked it. The room was cold. Though it was June, she felt as if she were lying in a coffin buried deep in the chilly ground. She closed her eyes, forcing herself to sleep, and dreamed of her 16-year-old self crying helplessly over her puppy that had been taken away and put down. Because Julian was allergic to fur the future, Mrs. Hayes could not have a dog. Then she dreamed of being 19, sent by her father to that Swiss finishing school. She had been top of her class with a guaranteed spot at Yale, but she was locked away in that iron-gated institution learning how to be a wife. In her dream, they were both crying, telling her, Eleanor, walk forward. Don't ever look back. Eleanor would not look back. From the moment she handed Julian the divorce papers, she was prepared to burn everything to the ground. If the rest of her life was going to be spent as a caged bird, she would rather die. Her dreams that night were chaotic, but her internal clock still woke her at 5 a.m. In her old life, she would now be getting up to prepare breakfast for Julian and Leo, warming a glass of milk. She rubbed her temples. Remembering her mother-in-law's threat, she got up and went downstairs. But when she got there, she learned that Julian and Leo had left early. They had gone with Sophia to watch the sunrise. Eleanor found it laughable. It was painfully obvious to anyone with eyes that Leo didn't need her as a mother, yet Mrs. Hayes insisted she return to the estate. In the eyes of the Hayes family, she had never been treated as the lady of the house, yet she was required to be present wherever the Mrs. Hayes was supposed to be, even if only as a decorative vase. After surviving the weekend, Chloe immediately arranged for them to visit a local university to watch the college baseball team practice. You need to de-stress, she said. The 18-year-old athletes were charming, calling her ma'am and showering her with attention. After a few days of this, Eleanor's mood genuinely improved. Chloe was thrilled. See, now that you've seen what decent young men are like, don't you feel like that old man Julian isn't worth loving anymore? Eleanor smiled. Yes, I don't love him anymore. Seeing her play along, Chloe got more animated. That's the spirit I've been saying for years. You should have divorced him. Any of these guys here would treat you better than that cold, emotionless Julian. You should find yourself a nice, attentive young guy and live your best life. Eleanor was about to laughingly agree when she heard a cough behind her. She turned to see Julian and his assistant standing not far away. David looked nervous while Julian was silhouetted against the light, his expression unreadable. But then again, with her, he rarely had an expression. Eleanor pretended not to see him and started to lead Chloe away. She assumed Julian wouldn't care about this chance encounter. But to her surprise, he stepped forward and took her arm. There's a gathering you need to attend. Come with me. Without waiting for a response, he pulled her into his car. Once they were inside, she was still in a daze. In her memory, Julian had always treated her like she was invisible, with no opinions or feelings about her. This sudden assertiveness was something she had only ever encountered in the bedroom. As she collected her thoughts, he spoke again. Eleanor, for families like ours, isn't suitability the most important thing? It took her a moment to realize he was refuting what she and Chloe had been saying. So love didn't matter. Being cared for didn't matter. A bitter laugh escaped her. For the first time, she shot him a cold look. But your suitability is built on my silent suffering. And what gives you the right to demand that Julian stared at her for several long seconds but said nothing. Eleanor no longer had the energy to decipher his moods. She closed her eyes and feigned sleep. When they arrived at the private club, she realized it was just a small get-together for Julian's friends. He had never brought her to this kind of informal event before. Eleanor had never liked his friends. They looked down on her, calling her a doll. So she remained stone-faced throughout drinking a little wine. Later, feeling a bit drunk, she went to the restroom. After she left, one of Julian's friends leaned in. Julian, your wife didn't crack a smile all night. In fact, she even gave you the cold shoulder. The rumors about you two getting a divorce must be true. Julian swirled the wine in his glass. Who said I'm getting a divorce? Since I married her, my wife for this lifetime can only be Eleanor Vance. His friend was shocked. Are you serious? Julian shot him a look and said nothing. The friend, looking perplexed, finally managed a few words. Julian, you remember that tech CEO Mr. Grant you partnered with? He was just like you. Ignored his wife completely, never took her to company events. No one even knew she was Mrs. Grant. Eventually, she got fed up and divorced him. I hear he's still trying to win her back. If you're serious about spending your life with Eleanor, you'd better start showing her some attention. Otherwise, you might end up just like him. The hand Julian was using to swirl his glass paused for a fraction of a second. Then he said with cool certainty, she wouldn't. At that exact moment in the restroom, Eleanor received a text from her lawyer. Miss Vance, the divorce certificate for you and Mr. Julian Hayes has been processed and is ready for pickup at your convenience. The day had finally come. Eleanor immediately took a cab to the law firm and picked up the divorce certificate she had dreamed of. She opened it and read it over and over. From this moment on, she no longer had to treat Julian's words as gospel. She no longer had to live by the Hayes family's rules. She no longer had to eat bland, steamed vegetables to maintain the elegance of Mrs. Hayes. She no longer had to wear the same makeup every day, smile at people, and lie about how happy she was. She could go bungee jumping, racing, traveling. There were so many things she could do now. Leaving the law firm, Chloe said that to celebrate her freedom, they first needed to eat a meal that the former Mrs. Hayes would never be allowed to touch. She took Eleanor to a row of food trucks in a bustling night market. Milkshakes, BBQ ice cream. Eat whatever you want. Smelling the rich aroma of grilled meat and spices, Eleanor finally felt what it was like to be alive. That night, they ate skewers, drank beer, danced on the sidewalk, and laughed loud and unrestrained. In the end, Eleanor laughed until she cried. The weight that had been pressing on her for 10 years finally dissolved. Perhaps because she had been suppressed for so long, the pain and resentment needed an outlet. Fueled by alcohol, she unblocked Leo from her phone and dialed his number. The moment the call connected, she said, her eyes red. Leo, I want you to know, even if you don't like me, I am your biological mother. The one who almost died in the delivery room giving birth to you was me. The one who stayed up night after night taking care of you when you were sick was me. From the moment you called me vicious for an outsider like Sophia Liu, I stopped being your mother. And you don't get to call me mom anymore. You don't deserve it. Eleanor, what are you talking about? Julian's icy voice came through the phone. Eleanor paused, then realized the child was probably with him. She scoffed. Mr. Hayes, you have time to lecture me, but maybe you should spend it teaching your son some manners. Did you know that the night before my birthday, your son told me to divorce you to make way for Sophia Liu? And the funny thing is, that was the longest sentence he's ever said to me. Congratulations, Julian. I've given all of you what you wanted. With that, she blocked Leo's number again. After a night of drinking with Chloe, Eleanor booked a flight out of the country the next morning. She knew she had been a bit extreme last night, and once news of the divorce spread, her own family would not let her go. They might even try to force her to go back and beg Julian for forgiveness. Or worse, they might try to marry her off to someone else for a good price. She had to get out of New York. She wasn't coming back. After saying goodbye to Chloe, Eleanor packed a small bag and headed for the door. To her surprise, she saw the black Maybach parked a short distance away. Julian got out with Leo and walked toward her. Leo apologized to your mother. Leo, his face pale, clutched his shirt and bowed stiffly. Mom, I'm sorry. I shouldn't have said those things to you. I shouldn't have said I wanted you and Dad to get divorced. I know I was wrong. Will you forgive me? Eleanor gave a small laugh. No need to apologize. She had already vented her feelings and didn't care anymore. But then, to her utter astonishment, Julian spoke. I apologize. I didn't raise him well. It's my fault too. It was a miracle. The day she heard Julian Hayes voluntarily apologize. But could a simple sorry erase all the hurt? No. But Eleanor remembered the package in her bag, the one she had planned to mail to Julian from the airport. She said directly, Julian, if you're truly sorry, then give me a ride to the airport. Julian looked puzzled. The Hayes family doesn't have any overseas engagements scheduled. Where are you flying to? Eleanor gave a sarcastic smile. So aside from Hayes family business, I'm not allowed to have my own life. That's not what I meant. For the first time, Julian looked genuinely flustered. But she didn't care. It was Julian who had driven her to the wedding into the Hayes family's prison. It was only fitting that he should be the one to drive her away to personally sever their last connection. The ride to JFK was silent. Before getting out of the car, Eleanor handed Julian a beautifully wrapped box. A final gift. Julian paused, confused by her choice of words, but he took it. Thank you. Leo looked up at her, his small face hopeful. What about me, Mommy? Eleanor smiled. Yours is in there too. After all, it's a gift for both of you. You should be happy about it. She added, Don't open it for an hour. By then, my plane should have taken off. For a rare moment, Julian's expression softened. He even said, Come back soon. She just smiled without replying and turned away. She wasn't coming back. She was going to find her freedom. Julian watched her slender figure disappear into the terminal, a strange sense of unease creeping into his heart. He held the box, wanting to open it immediately, but Leo stopped him. Daddy, we promised Mom we'd wait an hour. We have to keep our promise. For the next hour, Julian held a financial report but didn't read a single page. He kept looking at the gift box. Finally, the hour was up. Leo eagerly reached for the box. Daddy, what did Mommy give us that's so mysterious? With a click, the lid came off. Julian turned his head just in time to see what was inside. Lying quietly on a bed of silk was a single official document, a certificate of divorce. Leo, though only 3, had already started his early education. He looked at the certificate in the box, his small lips moving as he sounded out the words. Finally, he asked Daddy, What's a divorce certificate? Mommy said. She was giving us a gift. Is this little booklet the gift? A loud buzzing filled Julian's head. He threw down the report. As he shot to his feet, his elbow knocked over a coffee cup, spilling warm liquid all over his bespoke suit trousers, leaving a dark stain he didn't even notice. He only had eyes for the box in Leo's hands. He didn't even realize his own hands were shaking uncontrollably. The small, crimson-covered booklet lay there quiet and unassuming, much like the presence in his home that had always been there but was often deliberately ignored. A sense of immense panic rose within him. He felt that once he opened this certificate, something would be gone forever. As a titan of industry, Julian Hayes was known for his unshakable composure. But this time he lost it completely. With a trembling hand, he slowly picked up the small booklet. He took several deep breaths before flipping it open. The moment he saw his name and Eleanor's side by side, his dark, piercing eyes widened in disbelief. He couldn't believe it. He was divorced. He wanted to call Eleanor immediately, but then remembered she was probably on a plane. A frustrated anger surged through him. Suppressing the urge to fly after her and demand an explanation, he called his assistant. Find out Mrs. Hayes' itinerary. I want to know where her flight is headed, and then I want you to bring her back to me immediately. Also find out who processed this divorce. There was no agreement, no court filing. How is this possible? His voice was laced with a panic and fury he himself didn't recognize. He was rarely so emotional. On the other end of the line, David was trembling. In all his years working for Julian, he had never seen him like this. Not even when a rival company's actions had cost them billions. Was this all because of the quiet, seemingly insignificant Mrs. Hayes? David shook his head in disbelief, but simply said, Yes, sir, and got to work. Julian paced back and forth in his vast study, the feeling of dread growing stronger. Finally, he picked up his phone and sent a friend request to the woman who had blocked him. What is this divorce certificate? You're a grown woman. Why would you play this kind of prank? Message me when you land. Leo and I are very worried about you. He paused, then typed again. Whatever the problem is, we can sit down and talk about it. We can communicate. There's no need to do something like this. You're a mother now, not a child. All his messages were met with silence. Julian sank into his leather office chair, pinching the bridge of his nose in exhaustion. Beside him, Leo, who had been quietly playing with blocks, looked up with innocent eyes. Daddy, does this gift mean you and Mommy are divorced? My friend told me. And so did our son. The words echoed in Julian's mind. He felt a lump in his throat, a suffocating pressure in his chest. After a long while, he finally whispered to himself or to the empty room, Eleanor, have you really given up on me? The waiting was agonizing. Hasn't the plane landed yet, Eleanor? Where in the world did you go? Julian didn't know how many times he had checked his watch, how many messages he had sent. But there was no reply. A strange sense of grievance welled up inside him. He and Eleanor had been so suitable. They had gotten along fine for 5 years. Why would she suddenly divorce him and leave without a word? He suddenly remembered Eleanor's voice on the phone yesterday. A cold sweat broke out on his forehead. Just then his phone rang. He answered instantly without even looking at the caller ID. Eleanor, you finally decided to call me back. I sent you so many messages. Why didn't you reply? The person on the other end was silent for a few seconds before speaking. Sir, it's me. Julian glanced at his phone screen. The little bit of energy he had regained instantly vanished. He pinched his brow, his voice low. Sorry. I was anxious. What's the news? Do you have any information on Mrs. Hayes? David chose his words carefully. Well, sir, we've confirmed that Mrs. Hayes boarded a flight to Europe today. But after she landed, we lost track of her connecting flights. So, we don't know which country she's in. His voice got quieter and quieter. Julian's face was a storm cloud. After a long silence, he asked hoarsely, "What about the divorce certificate? Did you find out about that?" David on the other end nodded, then quickly remembered Julian couldn't see him. "Yes, we found out. The divorce agreement was signed by you personally. Both our legal department and a forensics team have verified the signature and the contents. There are no issues." The anger he had been suppressing finally erupted. Julian's voice was frigid. "What do you mean, no issues?" David was taken aback, then slowly explained. "In the divorce agreement, Mrs. Hayes did not request any division of your assets. She essentially walked away with nothing. All marital assets, including her shares and properties, have been allocated to Master Leo's trust fund. She stated it was to be considered her payment of child support for Master Leo. She didn't want your assets. And she didn't want custody of Master Leo either." David was sweating profusely. He'd seen his share of high society drama, but he'd never seen a wealthy wife divorced so cleanly. Most people would fight tooth and nail for every penny. But Mrs. Hayes, she just left quietly. He didn't know if she truly didn't care, or if she was just powerless. As David was pondering this, Julian hung up. He clutched his phone, unable to process what he'd heard. He couldn't understand how a marriage that seemed perfectly fine to him had suddenly fallen apart. After a long silence, he let out a ragged breath, asking the empty air, "Eleanor, what were you so unhappy about?" Just then, the study door creaked open. Leo poked his head in and toddled over. He hugged Julian's leg, his eyes full of hope. "Daddy?" I asked. "Aunt Sophia. Mommy giving us the divorce certificate means I can have a new mommy. Daddy, please marry Aunt Sophia. I want Aunt Sophia to be my new mommy." In the past, Julian had dismissed such talk as childish nonsense, but now it grated on his ears. Was it really because of their son's words that Eleanor had left him? He frowned and scolded, "You're only 3. What do you know? Don't ever say things like that again. You only have one mother. There is no new mother." Leo, stunned by his father's harsh tone, scrunched up his face and burst into tears. "I want a new mommy. I want Aunt Sophia to be my new mommy. I don't want my old mommy. She's just like a nanny. She's no fun at all." Julian's anger flared. He picked Leo up and gave him a light smack on the bottom. "Who taught you to say these things? He should have realized sooner." Leo was only 3. He wouldn't know about divorce or say his mother was a nanny unless someone had been feeding him these ideas. The smack wasn't hard, but Leo reacted as if he'd been gravely injured. He struggled free and ran out of the room. "I hate you, Daddy. If you don't get me a new mommy, I'm running away." Julian, exasperated, started to go after him, but his phone rang again. It was Sophia. After a moment's hesitation, he chose to answer the phone instead of chasing his son. The call connected, and Sophia's soft voice came through. "Julian, I heard from Leo that you and Eleanor are divorced. What's going on? Is it just a child's misunderstanding?" Julian sighed. "It's a misunderstanding. I am not divorcing Eleanor. Was there something else?" Sophia was silent for a moment, then her voice took on a disappointed tone. "No. It's just that we were supposed to take Leo to the amusement park to see the fireworks today. I hadn't heard from either of you, so I just wanted to check in." A flicker of guilt crossed Julian's face. "I'm sorry, I forgot. We'll go some other time." By the time Julian hung up, Leo was long gone. He wasn't too worried. With so many staff in the penthouse, how could they lose track of a 3-year-old? But Leo had vanished right under everyone's noses. No one saw how he left the building. Even the security cameras only captured a brief glimpse of him walking away alone. Julian had his people turn the entire city upside down, but there was no trace of Leo. He dialed Eleanor's number again and again, but all he heard was the automated message. "The number you have dialed has been switched off." In desperation, he had his assistant find the number for Eleanor's best friend, Chloe. "Hello, this is Julian Hayes. Has Eleanor been in contact with you? If you hear from her, I need you to tell her immediately that because she insisted on this divorce, Leo has gone missing. If she has any shred of maternal instinct left, I expect her to come back right now." Before he could finish, Chloe's loud, annoyed voice cut him off. "Whoa, whoa, whoa. Your kid is missing. Call the police." What's Eleanor supposed to do? Does she have some psychic connection to him? She comes back and suddenly pinpoints his location. That's ridiculous. And don't you dare blame this on the divorce. You're the ones who pushed her to it. She should have divorced you years ago. You and that spoiled brat are both terrible. The line went dead with a sharp click. But then it rang again almost immediately. It was Sophia, Julian answered, but all he could make out was a panicked voice. Julian, help, someone's trying to… Leo. They're taking Leo. Let go of him, Leo. Don't be scared, Aunt Sophia. Watch out. The call cut off abruptly. Julian immediately had his team trace Sophia's phone signal and rushed to the location. When they arrived, they found Sophia and Leo unconscious on a dirt embankment just off a deserted stretch of highway. Sophia was covered in scrapes and bruises, a mess. But Leo was held tightly in her arms, completely unscathed except for a bit of dirt on his face. Everyone at the scene was moved. Julian's hands hanging by his sides, clenched into fists. He had them both sent to the hospital in an ambulance. As he watched the flashing red and blue lights disappear into the distance, he finally spoke to his assistant. Investigate Sophia. I want to know everything she's been doing lately, everyone she's been in contact with. Don't miss a single detail. David was stunned for a moment, then he understood. He had been with Julian searching the entire city without a single lead. How could the frail Miss Liu just happen to find him? And how could a 3-year-old boy slip away from a penthouse full of staff? If it was a real kidnapping, why was there no ransom demand? Why just leave them on the side of the road? Julian had clawed his way to the top of the business world. He wasn't a fool. The holes in the story were too obvious to ignore. Soon, Julian had the evidence in his hands, proof that Sophia had orchestrated the entire kidnapping plot. He stared at the file for a long time, his expression unreadable, a chilling aura emanating from him. Withdraw the police report. This stays quiet. Destroy the evidence. I don't want a third person to know about this. The official story is that Sophia saved Leo. David was in disbelief. Was Julian really going to cover for the person who had orchestrated his own son's kidnapping? But before he could make sense of it, Julian had already disappeared down the hospital corridor. When Julian entered the room, Sophia was propped up in bed, her face pale and fragile. She instinctively frowned, a hint of scrutiny entering her gaze. Sophia coughed weakly, deliberately, shifting to reveal the bruises on her arm. She frowned with concern. How is Leo? Is he okay? He's so young. This must have been so traumatic for him. It's all Eleanor's fault. Just leaving like that without a care for her child. What kind of irresponsible mother is she? I have to go see him. She made a show of trying to get out of bed, but as she passed Julian, he grabbed her arm. His voice was cold and controlled. Eleanor is my wife. Whether or not she is a fit mother is not for others to judge. Sophia looked up at Julian's hard profile and froze. The face that was usually so gentle with her was now devoid of any warmth, so cold it was frightening. Her palms grew sweaty. Julian, after all these years, how can you call me others? She softened her tone, appearing even more vulnerable. I was just worried. I spoke out of turn. But this kidnapping was so awful. Even I'm terrified. I've watched Leo grow up. I can't help but worry about him. Julian's hand tightened slightly. His gaze on her was now filled with a cold suspicion. After a long moment, he finally asked, if you found it so awful, so terrifying, then why did you arrange for Leo to be kidnapped? Why did you stage this whole charade? Sophia's pale face went rigid. She blinked innocently, her expression one of utter confusion. Julian, what are you talking about? I don't understand. Julian didn't explain. He just looked at her, his eyes a mixture of complexity and disappointment. I've already destroyed the evidence for you. From now on, stay away from Leo. I'm sending you abroad. I'll make sure you're well taken care of for the rest of your life. Don't come back. He turned to leave, but Sophia lunged forward and wrapped her arms around his waist. Julian, don't send me away. If I did something wrong, I can change. We've been together for so many years. I can't live without you. Julian remained unmoved, prying her hands from his waist. Sophia grew desperate. Julian, why? I admit I was a little hasty this time, but you and Eleanor are divorced. I just want to marry the man I love. What did I do wrong? I don't care that Leo isn't my child. I promise I'll be a good mother to him. Julian finally broke free, his brow furrowed, his eyes filled with disbelief. The man you love. The man you love. Isn't that my late older brother? Sophia's face drained of all color. Her lips trembled. What are you talking about? The person I've always loved is you. For all these years, you're the one who has been by my side, caring for me, protecting me. You remember my birthday better than I do. You're always there for me no matter what. You treat me better than you treat your own wife. Don't you love me? It's true. For a moment, something in Julian's mind snapped. He took a step back from Sophia. I took care of you to fulfill my brother's last wish. I have no romantic feelings for you and I will never marry you. The private jet will be ready today. You should leave as soon as possible." Without another look back, Julian walked out of the hospital room. Meanwhile, in Finland, Eleanor was oblivious to all of this. She had obtained a residency permit and enrolled in a local university determined to fulfill the dream she had been forced to abandon, becoming a diplomatic translator. Before classes started, she used the savings she had accumulated over the years to buy a small house. She had heard you could see the northern lights from there in the winter. She was looking forward to living alone, to finally being in control of her own time. She taught herself Finnish and took elective courses in German, Japanese, and Spanish. In her second year, Eleanor was accepted into a special program for international students. Within 3 years, she could be working at the embassy in Finland as a diplomat. Immersed in her studies and work, she rarely thought about her past. Her marriage to Julian felt like a distant memory. Here, Eleanor was not the young madam of the Hayes family. She was not Julian's wife or Leo's mother. Here she was just herself, a complete and independent person. The culture in Finland was different. People didn't follow a rigid path of school, college, work, marriage. Here, after high school, you were free to do whatever you wanted, work, marry, or do nothing at all. Your spot in the university system was held for you until you were ready to return. So Eleanor fit in well with her classmates. Many were her age or even older. In the 4 years she studied there, she felt a sense of freedom and joy she had never known. She made many friends. In her 5th year in Finland, Eleanor successfully joined the diplomatic corps at the embassy, becoming a diplomatic translator. She had no idea that for the past 6 years, Julian had never stopped looking for her. Back in the Hayes Tower CEO office, David burst in his face, beaming. "Sir, we have news of Mrs. Hayes. She's at the embassy in Finland." Julian shot up from his chair, a rare expression of joy on his face. David's eyes widened. He hadn't seen Julian smile in 6 years. Ever since Mrs. Hayes had divorced him, not even closing a multi-billion-dollar deal, had brought such a smile to his face. Julian started for the door, then turned back. "I need a complete current file on her. Get it for me." Now, a wave of elation surged through him. Julian couldn't suppress the curve of his lips. He looked at the family photo on his desk, the 3 of them, and his finger gently traced the outline of Eleanor's soft face. "I will clear up our misunderstandings. I will bring you back home." Eleanor never sought out news of Julian or Leo. In her mind, they had surely gotten their wish, and now had the wife and mother they wanted. Her days were packed with international conferences and translating documents. Life was busy and fulfilling, until one day, her superior brought her an English language project proposal for a new energy initiative. "Eleanor, you're the most capable person in our department. This proposal is a high priority for the Finnish Trade Commission. I need you to translate it as quickly as possible." Looking at the thick document, she smiled confidently. "Of course, sir. I'll get it done." Over the years, she had constantly honed her skills precisely for moments like this to take on challenges others couldn't. She thrived on pushing her limits. But when Eleanor opened the binder, she saw the cover page. It was a proposal from Hayes Corp. Julian. The familiar name resurfaced in her mind. She shook her head, took a deep breath, and told herself it was just a coincidence. Hayes Corp was a global entity. It made sense they would want to expand into Finland. After several sleepless nights, Eleanor delivered the translated proposal to her superior's office. He flipped through a few pages, nodding in approval. "Truly impressive. You live up to your reputation. To complete such a monumental task so quickly and so well. Eleanor, you are a true asset to this department." Eleanor knew her boss well. When he started praising someone, it usually meant a difficult assignment was coming. But who didn't like a compliment? "Sir, you can stop with the flattery," she said with a smile. "Just give me the assignment. Any more praise and my head won't fit through the door," he chuckled. All right. The representatives from Hayes Corp are coming to Finland for a site visit. Our government is taking this very seriously. I've already put your name down for the diplomatic translation work. And listen, it's not all work and no play. I remember you're single, right? The head of the Hayes Corp delegation is young, brilliant, and also single. It's a good opportunity for you to network. It can't be Julian, can it? Eleanor thought, a knot forming in her stomach. The world isn't that small. When the Hayes Corp delegation arrived, she accompanied her superior to the airport to greet them. "Eleanor," he said, "the Finns are hosting a welcome dinner tonight. It won't be too formal, so you can relax a bit during the translation. I'll introduce you to the representative in a moment." Just then, her boss waved at someone behind her. "Mr. Hayes, over here." He took Eleanor's hand and led her forward. She was still in a state of shock when she found herself standing in front of Julian Hayes. 6 years had passed, but time seemed to have barely touched him. He was still the same impassive quiet. Her boss gave her a gentle push forward, beaming. "Mr. Hayes, I'd like to introduce you to Miss Eleanor Vance from our embassy's diplomatic translation department. She'll be your accompanying translator for this trip. Don't let her youth and beauty fool you. Miss Vance is fluent in 5 languages and is our most outstanding translator. And she's single." Julian's gaze was fixed on Eleanor, his eyes filled with a probing, unreadable emotion. Eleanor smiled and extended her hand, her demeanor polite and distant. "Mr. Hayes, a pleasure." Julian stared at her for a few long seconds, his expression indecipherable, before finally taking her hand in his. Running into Julian was unexpected, but Eleanor just wanted to get through the formalities. She tried to withdraw her hand, but he held it tightly. After a couple of gentle tugs, her brow furrowed and her tone grew cool. "Mr. Hayes, what is the meaning of this?" Her superior, sensing the awkward atmosphere, quickly jumped in. "Ah, the beauty and unique charm of our diplomatic translators are always captivating. It seems Mr. Hayes is no exception." Julian's eyes darkened. He released her hand, and for a rare moment, a ghost of a smile touched his lips. "Indeed." He said, no more, letting her hand go as she wished. The dinner began. Eleanor tried to put him out of her mind. It was just a temporary professional engagement. He couldn't possibly be here specifically for her. Composing herself, she sat beside him. Finnish is a complex language, but Eleanor translated every word with fluid grace, relaying Julian's points to the Finnish representatives and their responses back to him. He listened intently, his legs crossed a picture of aristocratic elegance. Finland has strong policy support in the clean energy sector, and their technological expertise is high, but market entry requires compliance with local regulations. We can offer legal counsel and channel resources. As she translated, Eleanor paused. In their 5 years of marriage, she realized she had never once listened to him speak with such focused attention. A pang of bitterness hit her, not for Julian but for herself. For the years she spent as a hollow shell, her soul imprisoned. But she was out now. Julian's deep voice continued. "I need to know if there are any special requirements regarding Finnish tax and labor laws." He spoke slowly, his gaze resting on her after each sentence. It was a calm, focused look. Eleanor instinctively avoided his eyes, carrying out her duties with professional detachment. This was no different from any other assignment she'd had in the past 6 years. The dinner was a success. As they parted ways in the swirling Finnish snow, Eleanor pulled her scarf tighter. She shook his gloved hand briefly. "Mr. Hayes, it was a pleasure. Goodbye." She turned to leave, her boots crunching on the fresh snow. Just as she opened her car door, a voice called out from behind her. "Eleanor." She stopped but didn't turn around, waiting for him to continue. The wind was biting her fingertips, growing numb. Finally, his voice came again. "Don't you have anything to say to me?" Was it her imagination, or was there a strange note of grievance in his hoarse voice? Eleanor's heart stuttered. It must be the cold. "Mr. Hayes, I've already translated everything that needed to be said at the dinner. As for anything else, I have nothing to say." But Julian seemed unwilling to let her go. A note of urgency entered his usually cool, composed tone. "Eleanor, when you left without a word, even if you weren't thinking about my feelings, what about Leo's? It's been 6 years. He's 9 now. Don't you miss him at all?" Eleanor turned around, a placid smile on her face. A child who had no regard for his mother's efforts. What is there to miss? Besides, he should be quite happy by now with his new mother. Snowflakes settled on Julian's shoulders, the black overcoat making his tall, lean figure seem even more solitary. He frowned, his eyes filled with a confusion that seemed genuine. He sighed a small cloud of condensation in the frigid air and walked toward her through the snow. For once his voice was soft. "Leo. He didn't disregard your efforts. He was just too young to know how to love. And he won't have a new mother. His mother will only ever be you. That is not up for debate. Too young to know how to love." Eleanor's gaze traveled over Julian's face, down the strong line of his jaw to his thin, expressive lips. The idea was almost comical. Julian and Leo knew how to remember Sophia's birthday, how to put thought and effort into a handmade gift for her. They knew how to love. They just didn't know how to love her. Eleanor leaned casually against her car, studying him. She wondered if she were still his Mrs. Hayes. Would he be standing here now, speaking to her so calmly? She shook her head with a self-deprecating smile. Julian frowned, puzzled. What are you laughing at? Eleanor didn't shy away from his gaze, her smile wide and unabashedly mocking. When you hear something funny, don't you laugh, Mr. Hayes? Whether we're divorced or not, we're hardly in a position to reminisce. You know next to nothing about me, and I have absolutely no interest in reliving a past that involves you. Without waiting for his reply, she got in her car, slammed the door, and sped off. Back home, Eleanor went through her nightly routine and collapsed into bed. Perhaps because she had seen Julian images of the past flooded her mind. 5 years of trying to be the perfect wife and mother, never once being herself. In her 6 years abroad, she had rarely thought of those times. She had been too busy compensating for her lost youth, her stolen college years. She had forgotten she was ever anyone's wife or mother. But Julian's appearance had forced all those buried memories to the surface. She pulled the duvet tighter, a deep weariness settling over her. She fell asleep quickly. In the middle of the night, a neighbor's dog began to bark, furiously waking her. The images from her dream, Julian's indifferent face, Leo's wary eyes dissipated. She took a few deep breaths to clear her head and went to the window to see what the commotion was. Standing outside her front door, still in the same black overcoat, was Julian. Eleanor had no idea how he had found her address, but she found the situation absurd. In the Finnish polar night, with temperatures dropping to 20 or 30 below 0 Celsius, he wouldn't last the night dressed like that. She had no doubt that if she left him out there, she would find a human-shaped ice sculpture on her doorstep in the morning. Though she didn't know what he wanted, she opened the door and let her ex-husband in. The last thing she needed was the trouble of him freezing to death outside her house. By the warm fireplace, she politely handed Julian a mug of coffee. His knuckles were red with cold and he was shivering uncontrollably. He cupped his hands around the warm mug, taking a long moment before he could speak. He offered her a weak smile. "Thank you." Eleanor's gaze flickered. Julian rarely smiled at her. Most of the time, he was cold and expressionless. She frowned, her voice sharp. "Julian, what do you want?" Julian lowered his eyes. The frost on his eyelashes slowly melted, forming a single crystalline drop that clung there, making him look surprisingly vulnerable. His lashes trembled, and the drop fell. When he spoke, his voice was faint, perhaps from the cold. "I want to know why we got divorced." Eleanor stared at him, and he met her gaze without flinching, his eyes filled with genuine confusion. A mix of emotions churned inside her. So everything she had endured for 5 years had been completely and utterly ignored. She sighed suddenly, regretting letting him in. She should have just turned off the lights and gone back to bed. Let him freeze. Her throat felt tight. After a long moment, 2 unfamiliar words came out. Eleanor. It was comical. The first time he had ever called her by her first name with any real intent was 6 years after their divorce. She wrapped a blanket tighter around herself and sank into an armchair, her gaze on him laced with irony. "Julian, has it ever occurred to you that the very fact you don't know the reason for our divorce is the reason for our divorce?" Julian's posture stiffened, a look of profound confusion on his face. He was always like this. His prestigious background, his successful career, his sharp mind, they made him adept at handling everything and consequently indifferent to everything. It was as if he believed the world would always move along the tracks he had laid for it. Perhaps Eleanor was one of the few derailments he had ever experienced. Somehow her eyes began to burn. She quickly shifted her position, swallowing the lump in her throat. "Julian, before the divorce, I told you many times. I said, since you and Leo both like Sophia so much, I'll agree to a divorce. I'll give up custody of Leo and walk away with nothing. Our marital assets can be transferred to Leo's name as a final contribution from his unloved mother. I told you all of this word for word." She leaned forward, her eyes locked on his. "But Julian, do you remember any of it?" Julian's hands tightened around the mug. He frowned as if trying desperately to recall something, but the blankness in his eyes betrayed him. He remembered nothing. Eleanor, of course, knew this would be the result. He had never truly listened to a single word she had said when she was his wife. Back then, to him, Eleanor had been a nominal partner, a glorified nanny, and a stand-in for Sophia's needs. A knot of frustration tightened in her chest. A malicious thought crossed her mind. She wanted to make him hurt. But then she realized nothing she did could probably hurt him. He had never cared. His current persistence was likely just about his derailed plan, a blow to his authority. He loved being in control. Julian hung his head, his voice filled with a defeated apology. "I'm sorry. I honestly don't remember you saying those things. I was probably busy. But if that's your reason for divorcing me, I really can't accept it." Eleanor sipped her coffee, preparing for a long night in the perpetual twilight of the Finnish winter. She raised an eyebrow. Oh, what about the scent of another woman's perfume on your clothes every night when you came home? Is that a good enough reason? Julian's expression froze. He seemed to have caught a contradiction in her words, but he shook his head as if the idea was preposterous. Sophia. You divorced me because of her. The surprise in Julian's voice was palpable, as if divorcing him over Sophia was even more ridiculous than divorcing him for never listening to her. Eleanor just sipped her coffee and nodded coolly. Yes. You came home every day smelling of her perfume. Leo was constantly talking about wanting Aunt Sophia to be his new mom. Was I supposed to just cling pathetically to the title of Mrs. Hayes is a position I never even wanted? Julian's face went unusually pale. So, you suspected I was cheating on you. Eleanor held up a single finger and wagged it in front of him. Not suspected. When you started taking Sophia to every event and didn't correct people when they introduced her as your wife. When your friends mocked me to my face and joked about how you and Sophia were a better match. When you signed the divorce papers without a second glance, just so you could go and be with her. Whether you were physically cheating or not became irrelevant. Divorcing you was about not letting myself suffocate in the prison of being Mrs. Hayes. No one enjoys living behind a mask, being so bound by rules that you lose all your edges. Being that empty figurehead Julian. I never wanted that for myself. Julian's eyelashes fluttered. He was silent for a long time. Perhaps he hadn't expected her to say these things. Or perhaps he simply didn't care about her true feelings. He was just looking for a way to analyze his failure to learn from it. But from Eleanor's perspective, it was all pointless. He loved Sophia. He remembered her birthday planned thoughtful gifts and surprises. He would drop everything to go to her, listen to her every word, and knew all her likes and dislikes. His love for Sophia meant that this failure with Eleanor wouldn't impact his future relationships. Eleanor glanced at her watch. 4:30 a.m. If they were still married, she would have to get up in half an hour to make breakfast for him and Leo. A wave of exhaustion hit her. She stood up and opened the door. Mr. Hayes, I assume you've heard everything you wanted to know. Please leave now. I need to rest. Before she could finish, she heard a very clear, solemn, I'm sorry. She froze, the words caught in her throat. Julian looked at her directly and repeated slowly, I'm sorry. I didn't know that all those details I never noticed were causing you so much pain. I was wrong. I apologize. Eleanor couldn't help but laugh. To get an apology from the proud, arrogant Julian Hayes, she must be the first. But then a hollow feeling spread through her chest. She suddenly felt a pang of her old hurt. To think that when she laid out the mundane realities of their 5-year marriage, even he could see her pain. She subtly pressed a hand to her chest, feeling some of the old anger dissipate. Maybe she could finally make peace with the past. But there's one point I don't agree with, Julian said, suddenly breaking her train of thought. Eleanor glanced at him. He pressed his lips together and continued, I did not cheat on you. I am not in love with Sophia. The guilt and longing in his eyes were unmistakable. My brother. I took care of her, gave her whatever she wanted to fulfill my brother's dying wish. The reason I didn't correct people when they called her Mrs. Hayes was because I felt that if my brother were still alive, she would have been a rightful Mrs. Hayes. Eleanor waved a dismissive hand. It doesn't matter anymore. Her indifference seemed to sting him. He looked hurt as he insisted, no, it does matter. In the 6 years you've been gone, Leo and I have missed you terribly. I want to clear up these misunderstandings, so you can come back to us. Come back to the family. For a split second, Eleanor genuinely thought Julian was joking. She had waited 10 years for her freedom, and now he was asking her to return to the family. A tremor of laughter escaped her, then grew into a full-blown, unrestrained laugh. A look of sheer bewilderment crossed Julian's face. He truly didn't seem to understand what she was laughing about. Or perhaps he had never seen the real her before. Eleanor wiped a tear from the corner of her eye, clutching her aching stomach. It took several deep breaths to compose herself. Julian, are you kidding me? It took everything I had to finally divorce you. I have my own career now. Why on earth would I go back to that life? To do what? Be a free nanny? Or run around after you like a servant, delivering that ridiculous seafood chowder to your office every day? You feel guilty about your brother. You want to fulfill his last wish and take care of Sophia, that's fine. But why do you need to drag me into it? I don't owe your brother anything. I don't owe Sophia anything. And I certainly don't owe you anything. Julian tried to say something else, but Eleanor was already at the door, pulling it open. A blast of icy wind and snow rushed in, and the temperature in the room plummeted. She gripped the doorknob tightly, her voice as cold as the winter air. "Get out. Don't make me say it again." Julian finally left, but Eleanor, exhausted, couldn't get back to sleep. She tossed and turned until morning, then forced herself to get ready and go to work at the embassy. But as soon as she arrived at the office, she was hit with terrible news. Her superior stood before her, his tone grave. "Eleanor, you haven't been with us long, but your work ethic and abilities are outstanding. This new energy project with Hayes Corp is of great significance to the relationship between our two countries. Our senior officials want to take this opportunity to visit their headquarters in the U.S. with Mr. Hayes. We need an accompanying translator. I've already submitted your name. You've been away for 6 years. This is a good chance for you to go back and see your family." Eleanor listened with a smile plastered on her face while inside a stampede of wild horses was raging. This was all Julian's fault. Everything got complicated the moment he showed up. She forced a professional smile and stood up. "Please rest assured, sir. I will complete the mission." That afternoon, she boarded a private jet back to the United States with Julian and the Finnish delegation. She didn't know who had made the seating arrangements, but she was placed right next to him. Eleanor pinched the bridge of her nose, exhausted, and turned to look out the window, avoiding him. They had both been up all night, but Julian showed no signs of fatigue. A few moments later, a soft, thick blanket was draped over her. Julian's movements were careful, as if he was afraid of waking her. But she wasn't asleep, she just didn't want to look at him. To Eleanor, Julian was a man she had once genuinely loved and admired. He was also the chains that had bound her. Their relationship had been severed the moment she signed the divorce papers. She just hadn't expected that as soon as she stepped off the plane, she would see the son with whom she shared only a biological connection. Leo was standing in the waiting area holding his grandmother's hand. At 9 years old, he was no longer a soft round toddler. He had grown much taller. His eyes were red-rimmed, and the moment he saw Eleanor, he shouted, "Mom!" The members of the Finnish delegation exchanged confused glances. Someone whispered a question. Eleanor maintained her professional smile and replied smoothly in Finnish. "That little boy has probably lost his mother." Beside her, Julian's face darkened, so he understood Finnish. Leo started to run towards her, but his grandmother held him back. The dignified old woman didn't let him cause a scene. She simply took his hand and led him away. Eleanor knew Mrs. Hayes hadn't come here for a happy mother-son reunion. It was more likely a tactic to pressure her into something, but she no longer had any reason to obey. The days spent accompanying the Finnish delegation on their tour of Hayes Corp went smoothly. Professionally, Julian was flawless. But as soon as the official tour ended, he sought her out. "Eleanor, the delegation's work is mostly finished. Would you like to come home with me and see Leo? He misses you." "Misses me." Eleanor couldn't help but picture the miniature version of Julian, his face full of disdain and rejection. She shook her head. "I don't think so. He never liked me before. After being gone for 6 years, he probably dislikes me even more. He wanted Sophia to be his mother." "You want to honor your brother's last wish. Why don't you just marry her? It would be a perfect solution for everyone. And it would save your future wife the trouble of having to help you take care of your sister-in-law." Julian pinched the bridge of his nose and sighed wearily. "Eleanor, do we have to talk like this?" Eleanor gave him a cool glance. "Don't like it. We could just not talk at all." With that, she packed her things and went back to her hotel. As for her own family, there was no reason to go back. Learning that Chloe was also in the city, Eleanor's mood lifted. She quickly arranged to meet her. The moment they saw each other, Chloe's eyes lit up. She grabbed Eleanor's hands and spun her around. "This is it. This is the real you. It's been 6 years, but seeing you like this. I'm so happy for you, Ellie." When old friends get together, the conversation flows endlessly. Hours flew by. In the middle of their animated discussion, Eleanor's phone rang. It was an unfamiliar local number. She hesitated, then answered. A woman's tentative voice came through. "Hello, is this Leo Hayes' mother? I'm his homeroom teacher." Leo got into a fight at school with another student. "I just called his father and he told me to contact you." Chloe, annoyed at the interruption, snatched the phone. "You have the wrong number." She hung up. "What is wrong with Julian? You're divorced. You don't even have custody. You've only been back for a few days and he's already causing trouble." Before she could finish, the phone rang again. Eleanor answered. The teacher's voice was now anxious and impatient. "Mrs. Hayes, I really must ask you to come to the school. Adult issues shouldn't affect a child's well-being." Besides, Leo hit the other boy hard enough to need stitches. The other parents are here and they're demanding you come and take him to the hospital. There was no choice. She and Chloe had to go to the school. In the principal's office, several young boys stood looking disheveled. All of them had parents with them except for Leo, who stood alone. The injured boy's mother was holding her son, pointing at Leo and scolding him. "What is wrong with you hitting so hard at your age? Didn't your mother ever teach you not to use your fists?" Before she finished, the other boys started snickering. Leo doesn't have a mother. His mom abandoned him. Leo's a loser with no mom. Leo's face turned crimson. Like a cornered wolf cub, he lunged forward to fight again. It was clear the Hayes family had given him some sort of self-defense training, but this time the other parents were there to protect their children. He didn't stand a chance. As he was pushed and fell to the floor, he saw Eleanor standing in the doorway. His eyes instantly reddened. Eleanor could see tears welling up, but he bit his lip hard, quickly turned his head and scrambled back to his feet. Eleanor ignored Leo's defiant posture. She walked into the room, her gaze sweeping over the adults. She made a simple introduction. "I am Leo Hayes' biological mother. His father and I are divorced, and I do not have custody. For any financial compensation, you will need to speak with his father, Julian Hayes." At her words, Leo looked up at her in disbelief. From the corner of her eye, Eleanor saw him quickly wipe his eyes as if afraid she would see him cry. This child. Wasn't he the one who was always pushing for a divorce? Where were these tears coming from now? At the mention of Julian Hayes, the other parents exchanged glances, their aggressive demeanor softening considerably. Julian's name was a fixture in the financial news. Few people didn't know who he was. This was a minor issue that could have been easily resolved without his personal involvement. But he had deliberately pushed it onto her. Did he think this would reawaken her maternal love? Did he forget that love has to be mutual? Even parents don't always love their children. Eleanor took a deep breath, pushing away the memory of her own father, dragging her to that Swiss finishing school. Ahem. Mrs. Hayes, even if you are divorced from Mr. Hayes, you still need to give us an explanation for your son's behavior. Eleanor nodded, her gaze lightly falling on Leo. Why did you fight? Leo jutted out his chin, refusing to speak. She no longer had the patience she once had to coax him. If you don't want to talk, then wait for your father to get here. I have other things to do. I don't have time to waste on this. Her words seemed to trigger him. Like a wounded animal, Leo turned on her, his eyes red as he shouted, "They said, I don't have a mother. Are you happy now? Why didn't Dad marry Aunt Sophia? She would never ignore me like you do. I hate you. I hate you." Eleanor waited for him to finish, then raised an eyebrow. "When your father and I were married, you wanted Sophia to be your mother. Yelling at me then was at least understandable. Now that we're divorced, if you want someone to be your mother, you should go and find her yourself." The other parents started whispering among themselves. Such a young child already trying to break up his parents' marriage. No wonder his mother left him. That's Sophia Liu. I think I've seen her. Always with Mr. Hayes at those fancy events. I thought she was Mrs. Hayes. Turns out she's the other woman. At his age, Leo was sensitive. He couldn't stand hearing those words. He turned to run out of the office, but he only took a few steps before he stopped. Julian had arrived, flanked by his assistant and bodyguards. His face was a mask of indifference, radiating an intimidating presence. His arrival made the small office feel crowded. His cold gaze swept over everyone. What happened? No one spoke. Even Leo seemed afraid of him, standing silently with his head down. Eleanor gave him a cool look. You're here. Good. As the child's legal guardian, you should be the one to handle this. I'm leaving. Eleanor, Mom. She left both their calls behind her as she walked out of the office. Chloe was waiting in the car. That little brat. You shouldn't have even bothered. You have no idea. After you left, he threw a huge tantrum, demanding Sophia be his new mom. Julian gave him one slap, and he tried to run away from home. Almost got himself kidnapped for real. I heard it was Sophia who bravely saved him. A match made in heaven, those two. They went straight to a bar, and the incident at the school was quickly forgotten. But she hadn't expected that when they stumbled out of the bar tipsy, they would run right into Julian and Leo. He was holding Leo's hand. They must have been waiting for some time. The moment he saw Eleanor, his expression flickered. All he said was, "Eleanor, we need to talk." Julian was a man who didn't give up until he got what he wanted. Not wanting to waste time arguing, Eleanor told Chloe to get a ride home and got into the car with them. Leo sat in the front passenger seat while she and Julian sat in the back. The atmosphere was so tense she could practically hear the driver swallowing nervously. The car finally stopped in front of a restaurant. A valet rushed to open her door, but Julian beat him to it. Eleanor ignored the hand he offered and got out herself. Julian's outstretched fingers slowly curled into a fist, a look of disappointment on his face. The restaurant was the same one she had booked for her birthday 6 years ago. 6 years ago, she had asked Julian to celebrate with her, only to be met with silence. He had then booked the entire place for Sophia, and she hadn't even been able to get a table. Now, 6 years later, he was booking it for her. But she no longer needed it. Eleanor sat down and got straight to the point. If you want to talk, just say it. But let me make 2 things clear. Transferring custody is not an option, and remarrying is not an option. In other words, she wanted neither of them. Julian's brow furrowed. He seemed to be struggling for words. Leo stared at her, his eyes red and on the verge of tears. But Eleanor was no longer the mother who would stay up all night comforting him. Finally, Julian spoke. Eleanor, if you didn't like me, why did you marry me in the first place? I always thought we were suitable. That you were the most perfect Mrs. Hayes. A flicker of something that looked like pain crossed his eyes. But Eleanor was thrown back into a memory that made her shiver. She closed her eyes, trying to banish the horrifying images. It was no use. She had to admit that even though she was free, the past was still a part of her. She took a breath and a sip of water. If you were sent to a finishing school where you were abused every day, locked in dark rooms, physically punished, and the only way out was to become a template of a perfect society wife, you would have agreed too, wouldn't you? Julian stared at her as if he didn't understand what she was saying. Eleanor let out a bitter laugh. You don't think I, who was top of my class my entire life, didn't love to study, do you? From the age of 16, I was chosen by your family to be groomed as the future Mrs. Hayes. At 18, I rebelled, got a boyfriend, and was promptly shipped off to that school. I wasn't let out until our wedding day. I still can't bear to think about that time. So no, I have no desire to be your Mrs. Hayes. Not then and not now. I did try at first. I hoped for a happy marriage, a loving family. But you two personally shattered that hope. You made me realize that the Hayes family is a cage that would have completely destroyed me if I hadn't left. Now I have a new life. The best thing you can do is not disturb it. As for this restaurant. After that night 6 years ago, the very thought of it makes me sick. With that, Eleanor grabbed her bag and walked out, not giving either of them a chance to respond. Just as she reached the door, she heard a choked voice behind her. I'm sorry. I didn't know you went through all that. But I still have to ask. You said you hoped for a happy marriage. Does that mean you liked me, that you loved me? If so, is there any chance, even a small one, that we could start over? Eleanor didn't turn back. She didn't answer. She hadn't expected that the next day her long-estranged father would show up at her hotel. He wore a fawning, apologetic smile. My dear daughter, where have you been all these years? Why didn't you even call home? Eleanor looked at the new gray hairs at his temples and felt a complicated mix of emotions. The man who had once held so much power over her was now bowing his head. It was as if all the things that had once seemed insurmountable were in fact conquerable. Mr. Vance, she said coolly, if you have something to say, please say it directly. There's no need to beat around the bush. He was clearly taken aback by her cold tone. His smile faltered. Well, Dad was just thinking since you haven't been home in so long, maybe you could come over for dinner. In your absence, Mr. Hayes has been very supportive of our family business. I can tell he still has feelings for you. You divorced without consulting the family. Now that you're back, maybe our two families can sit down and talk again. After all, you were meant to marry him since you were 16. Eleanor understood his meaning. Her smile grew colder. You're saying Julian and I should remarry? Her father nodded eagerly, a calculating glint in his eyes. She scoffed. What did the Hayes family promise you this time? A partnership. A new project. If Vance Industries has to resort to selling its daughter to stay afloat, then it deserves to go bankrupt. His smile vanished completely. You've been away for a few years and think you've grown wings. Is that any way to talk to your father? If someone hadn't been whispering in Julian's ear about that finishing school, he wouldn't have suddenly pulled all his investments from our company. In one night, our market value dropped by half. You are coming with me to see him today, and that's final. He reached for her arm, but she shook him off. This rotten piece of her past. It was time to cut it out. An hour later, Eleanor found herself in the living room of her father's house. Julian was there with Leo sitting beside him. He looked at her father with the same indifference he had once shown her. Eleanor ignored them all and found a seat. Julian looked at her, choosing his words carefully. "Eleanor, I came here today." She cut him off with a sharp glance. "Why you're here is of no interest to me. For my part, the best thing you could do is not be here at all." Julian's expression darkened. After a long moment, he managed, "I'm not trying to pressure you. He was cut off again, this time by her father, who bustled in with a bottle of expensive liquor. Come, try some of my best vintage," he said, pouring a glass for Julian. "Eleanor has always been a bit headstrong. I've already had a word with her. She came back this time to settle down and live a good life with you, Mr. Hayes. I think we should pick an auspicious date for another wedding." He bowed and scraped, filling Julian's glass, speaking as if he were a feudal lord with absolute power. In his eyes, Eleanor had never been a daughter, only a commodity. But Julian, the man with even more power, said nothing. Her father tried again. "Mr. Hayes, I know you're still upset about her divorcing you so rashly 6 years ago. We can keep the new wedding small, of course. Or if you don't want one at all, that's fine too. Just take her back. What do you think?" The response came not from Julian, but from the front door of the house as it was pushed open with force. "I think not. What century is this still arranging marriages, and trying to poach from my State Department, no less?" Men in dark suits and earpieces filed into the room, securing the perimeter. Following them was an older man in a simple but official-looking jacket. Though his hair was white, his presence was formidable, his eyes as sharp as a hawk's. Though a businessman, Eleanor's father knew who these types of security details protected. The atmosphere in the room instantly chilled. He rushed forward, bowing slightly. "Sir, I don't know what brings you to my humble home, but it is an honor." The old man snorted, his gaze piercing. In 1950, the marriage law abolished arranged marriages. In 1992, the Violence Against Women Act explicitly prohibited domestic abuse. Yet here you are today, forcibly bringing one of our State Department diplomats here and trying to arrange her marriage. Are you trying to turn back the clock? Her father froze. Not just him, but everyone in the room who knew Eleanor, including the son who had once treated her like a nanny, stared at the old man in shock. "State Department, sir, this is a family dinner. You must be mistaken. My daughter, she never even went to college. How could she be with the State Department? She's just a housewife. She ran away from home a few years ago after some divorce nonsense. You shouldn't." Before he could finish, 2 of the security men stepped forward and restrained him. Amid the stunned silence, Eleanor stood up and walked to the old man's side, her expression apologetic. She had sent a quick text to a colleague and friend when her father had taken her. "Director, I'm so sorry you had to come all this way because of my family matters." The old man, a senior official she had met once when she first joined the diplomatic corps, waved a dismissive hand. "Nonsense. You are an outstanding member of our department. A young woman fluent in 5 languages with exceptional professional skills. If anyone tries to force you into being a housewife, I'll be the first to object. In the new era, our female comrades can achieve anything. They shouldn't be constrained by marriage. Free choice in love and marriage the organization will always support, but arranged marriages are absolutely unacceptable. Miss Vance, I'm cutting your family leave short. I trust you have no objections." Eleanor shook her head, smiling. "Of course not, sir. I've been eager to get back to work." The old man nodded. A black sedan with government plates pulled right up to the front door, followed by several police cars. As Eleanor saw the director into the back of the car, she saw uniformed officers approach her father, showing him a warrant. "We have reason to believe that the finishing school you sent Miss Vance to was involved in illegal confinement abuse and psychological manipulation. Please come with us to assist in our investigation." Her father shouted his innocence, but no one paid him any mind. The family dinner had ended in disaster. Eleanor was about to get in the car with the director when she heard a choked mom from behind her. Her hand on the car door tightened. The director looked at her and nodded. "A diplomat's life isn't easy. You're stationed abroad for years at a time with few chances to see family. It's best to handle these things now." With that, he departed. Eleanor turned to face Julian and Leo. Leo was clutching his father's hand, his eyes brimming with tears. He tilted his head back stubbornly, trying to keep them from falling. You really don't want to be my mom anymore. You really don't want me." Leo's lip trembled, as if the words were hard to say. "Dad and we've really missed you these past few years. I see him in his study sometimes, just staring at your photo. What I said before. I was just a kid. I didn't know better. Can you forgive me, Mom? Can you please love me again?" Eleanor looked at him and a wave of sadness washed over her. He was, after all, the child she had carried for 9 months, the child she had nearly died to bring into the world. It was impossible not to love him, not to feel a pang of sympathy. But how could she allow herself to embrace the knife that had once been pointed at her heart? In the isolation of the Hayes family, her own son had unhesitatingly stood against her. She could forgive now for her own peace. But she could not erase the pain of the past Eleanor. She looked at him with a calm, gentle expression. You and I didn't have much time together. In those few years, for more than half of it, you were just a baby learning to speak. I held you every day, teaching you words, but you probably don't remember much. Later, when you started to understand the world, you decided I wasn't good enough. You wanted someone else to be your mother. Even if you were just a naive child, my heartbreak in that moment was real. For the next 6 years, I was absent from your life. I never knew about your education, your upbringing. Technically, I have no right to judge you or teach you anything. But today I want to tell you one thing. This might be the last lesson I can ever give you. People must be responsible for their words and their actions, even if you were just a child. I was just a child is not an excuse that merits forgiveness. As she finished, she heard a desperate cry from behind her. Mom, I know I was wrong. Don't go. Please don't go. Eleanor's steps faltered for a fraction of a second, but she did not stop. Call her cold-hearted, irresponsible, whatever they wanted. She had already given Leo the best she could. He would stay with Julian, receive the best education, and never lack for love or care. He would inherit the entire Hayes Corporation. The life others dreamed of would be his starting point. He had far more than he could ever imagine. Losing a mother might have an irreparable impact on his development. But for him to gain a mother, Eleanor would have to lose her entire life. If he had been a child who truly loved her, she might have been willing to make that sacrifice. But he wasn't. And that was a tragedy. Her past life, her marriage, her motherhood had been a failure. But now she had finally succeeded in becoming herself. Someone in this world had to love her. If there was no one else, then it would have to be her. With this thought, a small, genuine smile touched Eleanor's lips, and she walked out of the Hayes estate with a lighter step. On the day she returned to Finland, Julian came to the airport to see her off. He didn't ask her about remarrying or if there was still a chance. He just watched her silently for a long time before posing an impossible hypothetical. Eleanor, he said, if we could do it all over again, I would cherish you. I would love you. Instead of this. Realizing what I lost only after it was gone. I always just assumed you would be there. I never imagined that nothing I did ever made you happy. Eleanor. I am so sorry. Eleanor didn't answer him. She just looked up at the departures board. You saw me off last time too. We just didn't get to say a proper goodbye. Julian. Let's say a proper goodbye this time. The word goodbye seemed to pierce Julian's composure. His brow twitched, his eyes filled with a suffocating sadness. Can't we? His lips trembled, but he couldn't form a complete sentence. Eleanor stood before him and opened her arms. Don't be so sad. We did share a part of our lives together. I'm an old friend who knows you well, right? Let's have a hug. Before she could finish, she was pulled into a warm, woodsy-scented embrace. Julian held her tightly, his arms constricting around her as if trying to merge her into his very bones. In their marriage, they had rarely shared such intimacy. A simple hug, holding hands, sitting down for a calm conversation, these were things Eleanor had once dreamed of. Things she had craved and never received. And now that she no longer wanted them, they were being offered freely. Eleanor sighed and gently patted his back. His shoulders were shaking. Leo, she said, her voice a little strained, please take good care of him. And if you find the right person, build a new family. Remember to be good to her this time. Julian held her even tighter, shaking his head. A single cool drop landed on her neck. Eleanor couldn't help but marvel at fate's cruel sense of humor. She had always believed Julian had no feelings for her, which was why she had left so decisively. She thought her departure was the best solution for everyone. She would gain her freedom. Julian would find love, and Leo would get the mother he wanted. She never thought it would all be a series of missed chances. Perhaps for Julian, this relationship was also a regret. He whispered in her ear, his voice ragged. I'm so sad that I never held you like this before. For a moment, Eleanor's eyes welled up, but then she smiled with a sense of release. She gently pushed away from him. It doesn't matter anymore, Julian. We both have to move forward. Don't look back. Julian took her hand, his gaze intense. I won't have a new wife, and Leo will only ever have one mother. I know the past hurt you deeply and you can't forgive us. But Leo and I will wait for you. If one day you want to see us, just tell me. No matter where I am, I will bring Leo to you immediately. Eleanor, my door will always be open for you. Just then, a small figure darted out from behind a pillar. Leo, his eyes red, choked out, Mom, I know I was wrong. I'll wait for you. I'll wait until you're ready to be my mom again. Eleanor knelt down, and just as she had done countless times when he was little, gently wiped the tears from his face. I'm sorry, Leo. I can't stay by your side and fulfill all the duties of a mother. But I will always be your mother. That will never change. No one can take that away. But before a mother can be a mother, she must first be herself. The airport announcement echoed through the terminal. Passengers for Finnair flight AY52 to Helsinki, please proceed to gate B12 for boarding. Eleanor stood up, gave Leo's head one last gentle pat, and looked at Julian. Take him home. With that, she picked up her small carry-on and turned away without a backward glance. As the plane climbed above the clouds, the city below became a grid of glittering lights. Eleanor finally realized she had left again. Perhaps the bonds of blood would bring them together again in the future, but her choice would remain the same. The road ahead was long, but she had to be herself first.